All right. So let's kick off, folks. I'm hoping that Mr. Hinchin can hear me. James, can you hear me? Hello. Just making sure that everyone's on.
Hello, can you hear me?
Mr. Hinchin.
Hi, guys.
How are you?
I'm going okay. How are you guys going?
Good. You're not showing video today. Is that, do you want to it's a bad morning?
A little bit, yeah. Just a small house here, so just moving around a bit.
Okay, so you're sort of like walking and talking, eh?
Yeah.
Okay. And Shanawaz. Hello. Shanawaz, how are you?
I'm good, thanks. I finally managed to get on.
That's good. Nice to put a name to a face. Okay. So, guys, we're going to kick off because I don't want to, because it's a Saturday morning. I'm sure you've got lots of other things to do, including your executive summary. So I'm going to kick off today. Let me just hide a few of these little apps that I've got going on here. And if you could all please mute so we can sort of save the background noise with everyone. We've got dogs and kids and stuff happening. All right. Can everyone see my screen? Please say no if you can't. All right. So it looks like everyone has. So what we're going to go through today is I did promise, of course, to focus on the, the parts to do with your executive summary. And I think there's, a few of you probably want to check in. You may already be, well, I'm assuming you'd be at least very much across it with your executive summary, and also just double checking that you're also making sure that you're including things that you should be including to make sure that you get your the best score you possibly can for this particular assessment. So the first thing I want to do is I think we'll go straight into what I actually talked about during the week, but at this point in time, I just want to make sure that everybody, and I absolutely get it, that my brain is the same as yours. My brain has too many tabs open, just like everybody else's does. So we of course we all appreciate how busy your lives are, families, working. You may have two jobs as opposed to one, so we get it. So we actually understand the fact that our brains all just have too many tabs open. The thing that I want to talk about today, and I will sort of briefly talk about these things because I want to focus more on the executive summary, but really these are just sort of nuggets that play into the information that you'll actually see and the content that you'll actually see in week 4 as well as week 5, because I actually talk about something that you will see in week 5's content that you will focus on. But I want to talk to you about this today for a couple of reasons, because you've also got to think about it in your executive summary as well when you're looking at the types of media or tactics that you potentially would recommend to, say, misprint up. If you actually think about generations, say, versus the types of advertising formats, this little infograph just kind of gives you an idea of research that's gone into the generations. Depending on what generation you're from, so from the early 2000s, if you were born then, you'd be quite young. But the I generation is exactly what they actually call them as well. You've got the Gen Y, which are the early 80s to early 2000s, and the mid 60s to early 80s, which are called the Gen X. And I guess this actually talks about the positive approach that they have to these particular generations have to advertising. You can see there that Gen X and Gen Y have a positive. They don't really have a problem with cinema ads, as an example. But you drop down to Generation X, and that you've got it at 48%. That's quite a drop when you're actually looking at preferences and say dislikes. And I think one of the reasons why potentially Gen X, and this just gives you an example, I mean, we can go through each one of these advertising formats, but the reason potentially why Gen X is probably not a big fan of cinema ads, because we actually grew up not really having, and I put myself into Gen X, I guess, we grew up not actually having cinema ads. We actually watched movies, you know, prior to the cinema ads actually being integrated. So then that could actually explain the reason why Gen X is not a big fan of the ads. But you'll see how, interestingly enough, there, you know, this generation Z, which is your iGen, younger gen, these guys seem to be a-okay with cinema ads. Come down to, say, online search ads, video ads, and mobile video ads. This is an area that they're very familiar with. They grew up with the internet. They grew up with tech. They're extremely tech savvy. Tech is an integrated part of their lives and growing up. It's interesting that they tolerate less the actual internet-based advertising versus, say, the other generations who haven't necessarily, you know, they were before, you know, they were born before the internet was a big advertising tool. So it's just interesting to, and I just wanted to bring you guys up to speed with this and sort of get you guys to think about it a little bit, in as much as think about the profile and the folks that you're actually targeting with Miss Printup's recommendations, and whether or not they're the folks that and think about the actual tactics that you potentially would recommend to Miss Printup, knowing what generation and what their profile would be. So that's just giving you a little bit of information. It also touches on, of course, content in both camps, in both week 4 and week 5. Does anyone have any questions on that before I move on? No, we're all quiet for a Saturday morning. Okay, so another little media nugget I wanted to talk to you guys about, that actually you actually see this in week 5, but I wanted to talk to you about it a little bit more holistically, again linking back to the executive summary. Think about also the product and the product category and the industry that you're actually in when you're recommending to Miss Printup. Keep this in mind potentially as well. So paid, owned, earned model, it's been around for, I don't know, just about 10 years now, this idea of actually categorizing media. Because we have so many multi-touch points when it comes to our customers, we really in some cases don't know when the customer is actually going to make that decision. You know, back in the day, say 15, 20 years ago, we kind of knew where, you know, they had less touch points. It was either in store, it was either a radio ad or a TVC, or potentially from an email. So back, say 15 years ago, that they potentially would make a decision. We just have so many touch points now with customers, it's difficult to know when they're going to make that decision. The best way to do this was actually to look and categorize media in as much as almost the credibility. So if you actually think of paid media, you'll see that print, television, radio, magazine, you know, direct mail, those sorts of things, search as well. So we're mixing traditional and digital, which you'll actually see more about in week 5. But week 4 we talked about traditional, so you're seeing the traditional media there. So essentially, essentially, paid is a pushed out communication. It's pushing out into what we call strangers, because we don't know them. We haven't had contact with them before. It's just one way, and in a way, it's that push out to folks. Then you actually move down the line down to what we would refer to as owned media, and essentially this is really the content that is posted on a channel that you own. Think about the website, the companies that you actually work for, or that your own company. That is actually your own channel. So that's an owned media. Brochureware is owned. Your own Facebook page is owned. Your own mobile apps. These are owned channels that you have the opportunity to interact with customers, and it's more of a two-way street here. But they're considered customers at this point in time. They may be loyal, they may not be loyal. So, and it also doesn't really refer to much credibility in your own channel. So when you actually move down the track to earned, there's much more credibility with earned media, because essentially what these folks are turning into is advocates and fans. They've made a decision to be actually loyal, and they also have there's a word of mouth, there's the Facebook page, and there's Twitter, and a lot of areas about earned media is actually much more credible because you're actually in the end having fans and advocates for your brand. So the key factor here that I want to talk to you guys about today is the fact that it's great to actually categorize this media, but at the same time there needs to be specific metrics around this media in order to understand the success of the actual media itself. And also making sure that there's actually a unified customer experience across all of the media as well. So it's nice to actually we're just going to go with a paid opportunity or a paid version of the media. That doesn't actually work. The model is quite holistic. In today's environment or today's market, you actually have to have a good mix of paid right through to earned, because you want to move strangers through to fans and advocates. Does anyone have any questions on that today, on that paid, owned, and earned model?
Hi. Not so much on the paid, owned, and owned, but as far as the different media, and you mentioned the KPIs and measurable effects. At this stage in our learning, it seems a bit arbitrary to say like, can you just say, if you're giving like in your communication strategy a KPI, can you just say like percentage of market as opposed to like, we want 25% of market, because we don't have that information or the context really to give ourselves a KPI when we don't understand. Like we'd have this case study for a week or so. That's my question. Absolutely.
Reese, it's not that you actually have to focus on this. All I'm doing is getting you to think about, if you're actually thinking about your tactics, the credibility, if I can say that, the credibility of paid, owned and earned media. So don't necessarily focus on information you don't have, or things that you can actually make assumptions. That you definitely have the opportunity to do that in your case, in your executive summary. Mm-hmm. But I think what I would like you to do is to think about this in as much as how potentially earned versus paid media from a credibility perspective. And I'm not saying put the recommendation, I just want you to think about it in case it's something that you feel would be valid.
Yep.
Just consider the industry that you're actually in.
Yep. Sure thing. Thanks.
Yeah. And whether or not paid and earned is a good thing. Does that make sense? Does that answer your question though?
Kind of. Is it okay to just put as markers, because they said that all recommendations need to be SMART, and to be measurable you need kind of a goal. Correct. But can we just say, for example, like number of hits, like, or number of social media engagements, as opposed to like, we want 3 million, like, who knows?
Yeah, and that's purely going to be up to you. And you're right, you can only work with the information that you have.
Okay.
Right?
Thanks.
So yes, if you wanted to put, it depends on the type of metrics you actually want to use. But I think if you said, something that was a little bit overzealous potentially, that might be, you might be, I don't know, but might be questioned from whether or not that was actually potentially realistic. So there's assumptions you're going to have to make, Reese.
So I do have to make up a number.
I'm not going to give you the answers in that perspective.
Well, you
put in there a smart approach and metrics, I would say, definitely.
Okay. That seems, within the context of our learning, it seems like quite a leap to be able to understand the entire weight loss industry in the States. Mm-hmm. Especially as if this is our first or second subject in an entire marketing degree. But I'll give it a crack. Thanks.
If you've got any more comments or queries, just ping me afterwards, please.
Okay, will do. Thanks.
Okay. Does anyone else have any questions on that? No?
I know this is week 5 content, like media nuggets. How much of the weeks are we actually focusing on for the assignment? Is it just weeks 1 to 4 with this kind of added just to kind of help us out, or
this is just a nugget.
Yeah.
This is just literally a nugget. It's 1 to 3 at this point in time.
So it's 1 to 3.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So don't necessarily. All I'm doing is giving you some extra sort of nuggets to say you potentially could think about these sorts of things.
Okay.
Yeah, but focus on the weeks 1 to 3.
Cool.
Okay. Anyone else have any questions? No? Okay, let's move on, guys. Right, so I wanted to talk to you about, and you've brought it up correctly from this perspective, the executive summary. I want you guys to consider, if you've not considered thus far, the decision-making process. Again, this is in week 2, which is one of the concepts that was focused on in that particular week. Essentially, your decision-making process helps you develop your marketing communication strategy and plan whom to target. So when to target them, where to target them, and what to say to them, and how to actually address them based on the stage in the decision process. So for instance, my question would be to you guys, what's the customer journey for MetaBicycle? Using primary and secondary research, for example, interviews. If you went out into the field and actually asked people about a weight loss pill, and what would actually be the triggers, and what would interest them from that perspective. Why would they actually decide to actually take that? At what point do they actually make that decision? At what journey do they have to go through in order to get to that decision point? So the questions here is that why, who, where, and when, and the stages that they would actually go through to make that decision. So, for instance, if you had, say, you identified stage 1, who does that include? Which individuals or groups impact this particular stage? Is it a bigger, broader group before they actually move down to stage 2, where they're sort of thinking, I'm not so interested because it doesn't appeal to me. But however, there's a segment that actually moves down to stage 2 that says, okay, now who are the actual individuals that actually impact this stage? This is from your reading. But I'm trying to put it in context of your executive summary, in thinking about the actual customer journey for MetaBicycle and what would that be. It doesn't necessarily mean you actually have to include the whole customer journey, particularly in the executive summary. There is there's that idea that you would do a bit of analysis before you actually make that decision, and then include key information in your findings, whether or not that's a mixture between, as I pointed out, the idea of primary or secondary research. Does anyone want to sort of talk about that, or have any questions on the decision-making process you saw in week 2?
As you started talking about this, my computer completely froze, and I just shut it right down.
No.
And it just came back again. The first word you said about it, and then it just probably cut out.
It's a real shame.
Yeah. Can I ask, when would this recording be up? Like, would it be today at some point?
Pretty much straight afterwards.
Okay, I'll review it, and I'll listen to it then.
So really, guys, this is just to cap it off. This is for you guys to think about as part and parcel of going through the recommendations for Miss Printup. Is think about the decision-making process that these folks are going to go through. Does anyone else have any questions, or anyone else's screen froze?
So, sorry, for each target audience, is it going to be a different process, obviously? So you do this for each target audience?
I'm not going to give you the answers for that, but
okay.
but if you think, because some people may only think there's one target audience.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, guys.
Okay.
So it really does depend on what you believe is the important target audience and what stages those target audiences are. If you think about the target audiences or target audience you're actually thinking of, think about, would they go through the same process?
Yeah, so this is I don't know if you can give us the answer to this, but what what I
So-
make of this is that it's to do with the CPM, the consumer processing model. Is that correct?
Yep, it's part of week 2. That's
So-
correct.
So if they were going through hedonic, so where it's more experiential, would this not relate?
Yeah, but I'm just giving you one particular approach to it, because I guess we'll talk about something in a second, which it's just a concept of actually making sure that you have considered the decision-making process for your target audiences. So this you might use this as a base, as an approach to actually each stage, but you actually might use the other, because there are a couple of models in there, to be fair. So if I go to the next one, here's an example. Your tri-component model of sort of attitudes, and actually going through, through and approaching this from an ICM perspective, and looking at it as how you actually plan your IMC, and going through the 3 stages in generating or creating attitudes, or either changing them or forming them through this approach. So you can actually apply this too. So I'm really just giving you a couple of models. Really what I'm doing is I'm doing a bit of a recap of what you would have seen in week 2. But what I'm trying to get you guys to sort of also think about it in the MetaBICLE's approach. So how can you use these models that were, of course, explained to you in your learnings? How can you use these models to actually apply that to MetaBICLE? And I'm not saying the one before was the one you may choose this one versus, say, the other one, the who, what, and when approach.
So do they relate to all? Again, I don't know if you can answer this, but do they relate to all consumers, or is it like for this model, you could relate this to all consumers, not just ones that go through rational kind of processing? Okay.
Difficult for me to sort of give you all of that information, but really I just need you guys to make sure that you're thinking about and there is a reason why they're, that the weeks 1 and 3, weeks 1, 2, 3, this is focusing on those particular weeks, because it's the idea of actually, of course, using those models to help with your recommendations for Ms. Printup. Yeah. Does it make sense? It's a little tricky to how much that I can actually discuss at this point. But does everyone understand the 2 models that I've given you, or at least the approaches that you can actually take in actually understanding your target audiences, and it's essentially a customer journey. That's what you're looking at. What is the customer journey? And
makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Reese?
Yeah. In what I've already done, I've kind of done it differently, and I don't have time to change. That's all right. I've got work for the next 2 days. So
Yeah. It doesn't necessarily, and it may be the right way. It's just this idea of actually making sure that you've thought about the customer journey and the decision process that they go through. Really.
sure thing.
Mr. Hinchin, are you okay?
Yeah, no, okay with that, I think. Actually, just to clarify as well, when we present this information, so this can either be presented in like a little graph itself, so to speak, or in just like a paragraph kind of thing. Does either way okay? Will we lose marks or whatever for whichever way we present it?
James, you will not lose marks if you haven't put something in a table versus, say, in text. No. If you actually went about it in a, say, and it also, James, it also depends on, of course, the amount of time and wordage. It's actually the wordage, not the time, but the amount of wordage that you actually want to dedicate to this process, and how much information you want to focus on. What I would do is I definitely would do something on the side from an analysis perspective. You go through analysis and then pick out the salient points that you believe that Ms. Printup is not going to know. So the whole thing about an executive summary and this recommendation to her, and that's going to be one of my tips to you guys, is to not restate information she already knows. It's about recommending and putting information into your executive summary, the stuff that she doesn't know yet, because it's all about a recommendation. So I will go through those tips in a second, but James, you are not going to be marked down if you've gone through a process and the process is there, and that you haven't used a table versus a graph versus text. No. It's nice. It's great when you actually mix up your formats. Absolutely, it's especially if you put, if you're doing a list of say bullet pointed list, or you've tabled it because you're doing a comparison. I think that is a good format if you're looking at things that need to be compared, like target audiences, for instance. So yeah, does that help?
Yep. Yeah. No, that's good. Thanks.
Good. Anyone else? All right. No one else. Let's move on. Right. Also, guys, segmentation and targeting was in week 2. Also, a very relevant point for your executive summary. So you've actually got to think about the fact that when you're looking at targeting and when you're looking at messaging, it's not all things to all people. We often also look at the demos, the geos, and the psychographics when it comes to actually looking at segments. Segmentation is actually a process, whereas segment is the actual market itself. You can see here that when you actually cross-reference the geos, the psychos, and the demos, and when you actually cross-reference these areas, you can see here that your target audience is actually your sweet spot. They're the folks that you identify as the folks that are ripe, if you like, for the particular product or service. Well, in this case, it's the MetaBikel weight loss product. So it's actually identifying characteristics, where they live, where they live, what sort of characteristics, what are their age, what's their income, do they have children, what stage of life are they in, and then also understanding the psychographics. What are their attitudes towards things like weight loss? What's their attitudes towards life? What is the reason why they would actually want to be involved in such a product? So I guess the question there for you is, who is or are the best target audience for MetaBikel? Again, what is this actual sweet spot here? What are the actual characteristics that actually make up that particular target audience? And what positioning statement would you propose to that particular sweet spot? So again, this is very relevant for your executive summary in looking at the fact that there needs to be a positioning that is going to stimulate the interest and trigger the interest for your particular target audience for the drug. Does anyone want to have any discussions or questions on that? Reese is looking like he's got a question. But
I was thinking about it. With this particular industry, it seems like it has quite a broad appeal, but it sounds like you're going towards a very specific demographic. You even mentioned like locations. That's something I have not considered at all, apart from the United States in general. Is that a path that we should be going down?
Keep it simple, Reese.
Okay.
Keep it simple. Some folks have said, you know what, I know Australian market better than I actually know the US market. So a lot of people have actually translated it into, because then you can do that. It can be any market you like. It can be the US.
So it's too late for that now.
No, it might be too late for what you're saying, but that's okay. That's fine. Keep it simple, in as much as you don't have to necessarily go into a specific state. You could actually, I think you just need to think of your demos and geos and the psychographics and what does that actually make, what's the makeup of your target audience? Because that's going to give you an idea of also your reach when it comes to your communication, how you're going to talk to these people, how you're going to approach these people and address them. So
sure thing.
You can be, like I said, you can be as specific as you like, but keep it simple though.
Yeah.
Does everyone remember this back in week 2? I know it's a few weeks ago now, but does everyone remember the segmentation and the targeting? Does everyone remember it? Yep. Okay. Good. I'm not talking about something completely foreign here. Okay. Does anyone want to make any more comments on this idea of understanding the target audience and who you're addressing? No. Okay. Let's move on, guys. So, bonus hints for your case studies. If you have already done it and you're way ahead of the game, the game at the moment, that's great. If you want to modify some things, fantastic. Because at the end of the day, Harvard cases, as we've learned, it's all in the detail. There's a reason why Harvard pretty much put most of the information in from a detail perspective. So, guys, try not to miss anything that the Harvard case has actually thrown up and portrayed and displayed. So that's going to be my little hint to you. Please proofread. It's amazing how many folks don't necessarily proofread it because autocorrect changes metabical to metabolic, I think. So take care of that because you will be marked down if the actual at the very least the brand is not and the product is actually not correctly identified. Avoid too much jargon and waffle and in hiding your ideas. And I was mentioning to you before, Reese, is to keep things simple. You've got 3 pages. It's what the best thing to do is actually make sure that you're actually proposing a recommendation as a key part of your executive summary. Don't spend too many of your words on restating information that Miss Printup already knows. She kind of gets it. She knows metabical. She knows the information. She's kind of looking out the window, wondering how she's actually going to tackle this and positioning and all the questions that she had at the end of the case. Don't spend too much time setting the scene as well. Your introduction is as important as your conclusion. So, yes, set the scene, but again, keep it simple. Don't spend too long actually restating the information. And I guess, goes without saying, be succinct in addressing the issues to Miss Printup. Make it very obvious to her that this is your recommendation and this is why you're actually recommending it and what is and how you're substantiating it. And again, I mentioned don't overlook your conclusion just because, excuse me, it's last. Some folks have actually just thrown in a graph at the end and hope for the best. But that's actually not a conclusion. It doesn't actually round out why there is a recommendation and what that recommendation is. Excuse me. Use bullet points, as I mentioned before, to highlight important elements of your report. Mix up the formats that you actually use. You will not be marked down just for using text. If the content is there, the recommendations are there. You will not be marked down for that if you don't use it. If you're not that comfortable with graphics, all very cool. But it is a way of actually showing information in the best possible way. Reference, quotes, paraphrasing, and claims in the footer. It's amazing how many folks actually do have these wide sweeping statements or these big claims and they're actually not substantiated. So, we don't know where that's come from. If you've done some research, fabulous. Show it in your referencing and actually make sure that they're an insight reference. It's only 3 pages. I appreciate that. But the way I'd reference it is in 6 or 7 point form in a footer, and you just use numbers to identify those references based on what you're actually citing from your content or the research. And that goes also for if there is something that's mentioned in the case itself, like there is definitely data in the case. There is actually there is data in the case, so at least reference that. Does anyone want to have any questions, comments on that?
So for the recommendations, do we make them throughout the executive summary or leave them to the end, and then make them throughout and then do a summary at the end with a conclusion, or what do you recommend? What's the best practice? It's
going to be up to you.
Okay.
I think it's last week, where are we? Week 4, week 3, I actually put in a webinar, the best practices in writing an executive summary. So that, if you want to go back and revisit that, definitely have a look at that. Think about it from a report perspective. You've got your headings, you've got your section headings, right? And you're going to have to set the scene. Don't spend too long doing it, but you're going to have to set the scene and then go through the process of taking this print up. It's almost a bit like storytelling, really. It's and then also make it, the best thing to do in your introduction is you're telling a story of pretty much what you're just about to tell her, right? And it's the best way to do that is a section by section, and taking not only you but also Miss Printup, the audience here, through a process. So if you're actually putting the recommendations right throughout it, it depends on what the section is all about. If the section is all about, I don't know, the segmentation side of things, you're recommending, what are you recommending? So you've just got to think about what section, is it relevant to actually put a recommendation in that particular section? Yeah.
That clears it up, thank you.
Yeah, good. So, but go and look at week 3. Sorry.
Will do.
I just had a question between referencing and footnotes. So when you do an essay, referencing is quite detailed, and you've got, the date of the research and then the date that you viewed it and then the hyperlink. Do you include the viewed and the hyperlink as a footnote? Is it pretty much exactly the same?
Pretty much. It's RMIT use Harvard referencing.
Yeah.
And it's not too the Harvard referencing is not too heavy in comparison to APA. So yes, and it's I think Harvard referencing is accessible by, and then you actually just put your link. But honestly, put it as 6 point.
So we can reduce it right down to 6.
Yeah, legible. I've got glasses on, but they're legible. Yeah, no, I think anything beyond 6 is going to be a bit of a stretch. Yeah. 6
Just
to 7 points.
I don't actually don't remember seeing anything in referencing when you're referencing a case study, but I presume it's in there somewhere.
Are you talking about the brief to us? About
yeah,
that?
like for example, you said make sure if you're pulling information from the brief, make sure you reference or footnote that.
Yeah, the only reason why I say that is because there is data in there.
Yeah.
And there's an exhibit. So if you're referencing that, that's one of the reasons why I'm saying you need to say, well, case study, blah blah blah. You don't. There's no link. There's no link. You need to sort of. Sorry, say that again, Nicole.
So there'll be a particular format on how to do that in there somewhere. Yeah.
No, not that I've seen. Not that I've actually seen. So I don't think we're going to mark you down for for referencing it in a weird way, because honestly, the only reason why and the only reason why I'm making sure you guys cover off on it is because there is data in the case study. Otherwise, it's cool, really. But if you're doing some external referencing, absolutely, you need to reference it to make sure that your research has cred. Yeah. Any other questions?
Only being such a short 3-page summary, should we have a contents page?
No. Don't.
I didn't think so, but I was just making sure.
Pages.
Yeah,
just 3
exactly.
pages. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you don't need. It's an exec summary. It's only 3 pages. You don't need to. Yeah.
I just have a question with the timeline that we're including. Are we going to get marked down if it's not, like, we haven't used like Gantt or something like professional like that? If it's just kind of like, a basic line and with stating like when each thing's going to be, things like that.
Sarah, so isn't it?
Sarah.
Yeah. No, you will not be marked down because some folks haven't used Gantt charts before, as I've discovered. Yeah. So anything that you deem the most appropriate way and you're comfortable with in showing a timeline or a schedule, feel free. Whatever you feel comfortable with, as long as it's clear. Do you know what I mean? As long as it's clear and we understand the fact that that's, you know, what the values are. Is it time? Is it, you know, is it the tactics itself? So yeah, you won't be marked down.
So do we have to go into detail of like why we've put each thing where it is as well, or do we just put a timeline?
I'd introduce it personally. Anything that, I mean, at the end of the day, when it comes to putting charts and schedules and graphs in, the rule of thumb that you would always introduce it. Do you know what I mean? Because I think the one thing that if you're actually an external person reading it, say I'm Miss Printup in this case, and basically I'd be wondering, so what's the relevance of this chart? What's the relevance of this schedule? Why would you put this table in? How does it actually relate to the content that you're either going to just about to talk about, or you've already it's a reflection, you've already talked about it previously. So it is something that folks do, that they just sort of throw a chart in there and hope for the best. So that I think the main thing is to make sure that it's relevant. How does this relate to Miss Printup's the recommendation in the end? Yeah. Okay. Does that make sense?
Makes sense. Yeah.
Okay. Anyone else have any questions?
I do. As far as recommendations for the budget are concerned, is it okay, like, because one of the questions at the end is how much focus should she put on the support program? And if you're, for example, recommendation is that you put more of the budget, is it okay to say, I would, instead of 10% of the budget, you should increase it to like 20% of the budget, as opposed to being like putting in all the figures and adjusting the other figures to accordingly and stuff, because who's got the time?
Yeah, look, I can't give you a full direction on what to conclude and what not to include, Reese, to be fair. However, we are talking about return on marketing investment, just like any recommendation would actually include, especially if it involves cash, and actually how much investment and a percentage of investment that should actually go towards each, say, program versus campaign. So, and again, I would highly recommend that you keep it simple. Don't go through stuff that she already knows. She's interested in your recommendation, Reese. She's not interested in stuff that she already knows. So, you know, if saying to her that, you know, I don't know, this particular amount of money is going to go into this particular campaign, this percentage of it, and you believe this is you're recommending it because of this. Just keep it simple. Don't go into too much detail about stuff that she kind of already knows.
Okay.
This is probably the best I can give you in that perspective. Does it help though? Don't go. Yeah, don't go through all the numbers and talk about stuff that she knows already.
Okay.
Yeah. Does anyone else have some questions? Is it a no from everyone? Yes, no, okay. All right, guys, if you've got nothing else you want to question me, if you think about something, Nicole does. Oh, you're saying goodbye. Sorry, you're on mute, so I can't tell. Anyway, lovely to see you guys. Bye. Lovely to see you guys. Thank you. I'm hoping that I've given you some direction at least. And if you've got the time for in Reese's case, if you want to sort of make some little adjustments or tweaks to what you've done, we're looking forward to seeing the submission. And everyone's on track, I'm assuming, for tomorrow night. You've got to be in by midnight. Everyone's cool with submitting it. Yep. Good. All right, guys, thanks so much for actually joining this morning's webinar, and I'll see you online again on Thursday if you can join. All right.
Cool.
Have a great week, guys. Good luck.
Guys.
Thank you.
See you guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye.